And viewers, earlier today, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has stated that any revised peace plan must match the understanding reached between Russian President Vladimir Putin and US President Donald Trump at their Alaska summit back in August. Speaking at a news conference in Moscow, Lavrov has said that Russia supported the initial version of the US proposal and is waiting for a new interim draft after Washington's consultations with Ukraine and Europe. Moreover, Lavrov has also added that Moscow would view the situation differently in their next version if the next version does not reflect the Alaska discussions. He has also stressed that Russia truly values the active role taken by the United States in seeking a path to settlement, contrasting with their other Western capitals. And Alison Mutler, who's a former AP bureau chief in Romania, is joining us live from Bucharest. I extend a very warm welcome to you, Alison. Now, Alison, talks are being held in Abu Dhabi as of now. Do you see, and of course, we know that Trump has held a very zigzagged point of view on Ukraine. Ukraine has maintained that the plan was originally as well tilted towards Russia's side. Now, with this statement of Lavrov, do we see this as a warning of sorts to Trump?
I think the Russians have come out very well from these negotiations with Trump. And also, I have to say, on their silence, they never react about anything unless they have something to say. And they played very cool this last week, whereas Trump has been very noisy. He said it has to be done by Thursday. He's shown his impatience with Ukraine. Then they changed their tune a bit. Then it was unclear whether this proposal was actually drafted by the Russians and quickly translated with AI into English, whereas the Russians have been very cool about it. The Ukrainians obviously have been more alarmed, as has the European leaders, and there's been a flurry of meetings and discussions, and those are carrying on. But Russia, let's make no mistake, is very interested in having its maximalist demands, which are not just, are not fair, reflected in a final peace settlement. They want more territory. They want Ukraine to be defanged its military. They want to reduce the troops. They want a ban on a veto on Ukraine joining NATO. And they want elections. They want Zelensky out as soon as possible. He has been a huge thorn in their side, and it's incredibly embarrassing to them that it's taken almost 4 years to capture so little territory. So they are very keen to push their demands with Trump as much as possible. Trump, not just Trump himself, but Witkoff and his people.
All right. Well, even as Russia and US are holding talks in Abu Dhabi, missiles are pounding Kyiv. And this, as Zelensky says, that he will hold discussions with Trump on sensitive issues.
Yes, I mean, Russia is underlining that it is a force to be reckoned with. Missiles rained down on Kiev last night, striking various targets. I think 6 were killed, and that's almost like a blip in this war. It's nothing. And even in in Romania, where I'm reporting for, we had the most serious violation of its airspace from Russian drones since the beginning of the war. 4 counties in Romania were affected. It was the first time ever that Russian drones had entered Romanian airspace in daylight. And in Moldova, neighboring Moldova, which is not a NATO or EU member, a Russian drone fell on a roof there. So Russia is really keeping the pressure up. They want to show the US that they are winning this war, which they are not, but they want to show it. They're wanting to show that they are aggressive. And from time to time, of course, they will always tell us that they have nuclear weapons. So they are showing force in almost in little ways by doing attacks which have nothing to do with their original plans, which is of helping the ethnic Russian minority, but also encroaching onto NATO airspace, such as Romania, Poland, Denmark, Belgium, and so on.
All right. Request you to stay on with us, Alison. Let's give our viewers some more information. Now, as well, all know that the United States and Ukraine have recently held productive talks on a possible deal to end Russia's war in Geneva. The White House has now officially commented on it, saying that only a couple of points still need resolution. The press secretary has further said that US President Donald Trump remains optimistic that an agreement can be reached. Let's listen in first.
And they were really able to fine-tune the points. And so now there are just a couple points of disagreement that our teams continue to work through. You know, President Trump stopped the funding of this war, but the United States is still sending or selling a big amount of weapons to NATO. We cannot do that forever, and the president wants this war to end. He is a peacetime president. That's what he's pursuing, and today he remains optimistic and hopeful, and I know our teams are working around the clock to try to get this deal to an end.
All right, let's bring back Alison into the discussion. Alison, what does Trump administration really mean when it says that weapons flow is now unsustainable?
I think, as his spokeswoman said, that Trump, okay, he has proved, as you said earlier, zigzagged, but he's generally been more pro-Putin than pro-Zelensky. That's without a question of doubt. But his overriding desire is not just to give a deal to Moscow, because he wants to come up top himself, but it's to end this war. But even when we saw the original peace plan, or we heard reports of it, which was, I think most media said it was a hot mess. I would say it was pretty amateur. He knew very well that Ukraine would not agree to many of these points, which is what scrambled the European leaders and Ukraine to come up with an alternative plan. And of course, he is a master negotiator. He's very well aware of that you can't just have Russia and the United States working over the head of Ukraine and of Europe. So he's realistic about that, but his key overriding desire is to have a peace settlement as soon as possible. Initially, he told Ukraine they basically had to surrender and agree to this peace plan by Thanksgiving, but that's now been softened out a bit. Marco Rubio said, well, it doesn't really matter if it's Wednesday, Thursday, next Monday, etc., etc. But it's clear for the United States that the timeline is short. Why I see the problem now is actually with Russia, because the Ukrainian European counter-offer is apparently, as far as we know, is nothing like the original one. And Russia is pushing for maximalist demands. They really are. And they're not going to agree to what Ukraine and Europe wants. So I don't know what's going to happen. Of course, Donald Trump will put more pressure on Zelensky, but that also, he has to take into account Europe as well. We have some European leaders like Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, who has a good relationship with Trump. So there are a lot of factors involved in this, and it's unclear whether they will be able to come to, it'll be a compromise, whether that will be possible, because the Russian maximalist demands really aren't just to Ukraine and not acceptable to Europe either. And not really a peace. They won't guarantee a peace, that's for sure.
So what's the best bet? What's the best deal that Ukraine can get out of this?
I think that the key things for Ukraine are its land, because I don't think they will cede land that Russia has painfully tried to conquer but has failed. I think they don't want a veto on them joining NATO. That doesn't mean they will join. That doesn't mean they will join NATO. It just means they don't want a veto. They don't want an outside country telling them they can't join NATO. So I think that's important. I don't think they want any obligation on another country telling them they have to hold elections in 100 days. They have to look at their own constitution when they have to hold elections. Why should Russia tell them when they have to hold elections? So I think those are sort of sticking points. But I'm sure Ukraine, whether it says so publicly or not, would agree to cede some territory, because Russia has conquered some territory. Particularly the Russians are interested in the east, where they have their own ethnic Russian minority, and also there are key mineral deposits the US are interested in. So there may be some leeway with that. Russia sort of threw an olive branch that Ukraine could join the EU. That again is a question for the EU, because the country is certainly not ready. But I don't think Ukraine will agree to Russia also telling it has to pare down its military. Maybe it would reduce it slightly, but not to the levels that Russia will want it. So there might be some leeway on those issues.
All right. Well, I'll leave you at that, Alison. Thanks for joining us and sharing your opinion.